In a world defined by shifting alliances and geopolitical chess, there's one name that stands out, a name that elicits a range of emotions from admiration to apprehension. Vladimir Putin. A man known for his calculated moves, a leader who navigates the stormy seas of international politics with a certain pragmatism. But beneath this seemingly measured facade lies a complex figure, driven not just by politics, but by deep-rooted frustration and resentment. Today we delve into a tale of power, politics, and the delicate dance between East and West. This is the story of how the West-Russia relationship teetered on the brink, and the consequences that could reshape our world. Unraveling the messiness. It all starts with Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer who took charge of Russia in the early 2000s. In 1999, Putin succeeded Boris Yeltsin and set out to stabilize Russia after the turbulent 90s, steering it toward a more authoritarian path. He gained support by tapping into nationalist sentiment and embracing traditional values, while also regaining control of Russia's energy resources. Initially, relations with the West were positive, but as Putin consolidated power, tensions mounted. In 2008, Putin temporarily stepped aside as president, but retained control through Dmitry Medvedev. This maneuver allowed him to return to the presidency later, leading to a more assertive Russia. Now, let's shift our focus to the broader geopolitical landscape. After the Soviet Union's dissolution, new independent states emerged across Eastern Europe and Central Asia, reshaping regional dynamics. However, ethnic conflicts and nationalism added complexity to the post-Soviet space. In the realm of geopolitics, strategic stability in Europe became crucial post-Cold War. NATO expanded, and Russia sought to maintain influence in its former territories, leading to frozen conflicts. The West urged Russia to resolve these disputes, but progress was slow. Tensions escalated with NATO's eastward expansion and the US anti-missile shield plans. This strained the arms control framework between Russia and the West. While strategic nuclear arms agreements were held, control over tactical nuclear arms weakened. The situation worsened with the Ukrainian conflict, resulting in military build-ups on both sides. Fighting for your freedom. To understand Ukraine's struggles today, we need to rewind a bit. Ukraine and Russia have a deep and complex relationship. Ukraine was a key part of the Soviet Union and was even more populous and powerful than many other republics. When it declared independence in 1991, it was a big blow to the Soviet superpower. Ukraine has since sought its own path, but it wasn't a smooth ride. The country had to balance its ties with Western institutions like the EU and NATO while dealing with internal divisions. Western Ukraine leaned towards Europe, while Eastern Ukraine had closer ties with Russia. The situation boiled over in 2014 during the Maidan protests. These protests were sparked when Ukraine's then-president, Viktor Yanukovych, scrapped plans to get closer to the EU under pressure from Moscow. Ukrainians took to the streets, seeing Yanukovych's decision as a betrayal by a corrupt government. Russia, on the other hand, saw these protests as a Western-backed coup and began its intervention. The first move was the annexation of Crimea, a region with a significant ethnic Russian population. It was the first time since World War II that a European state had taken another's territory. Things escalated further when Russia started supporting separatists in eastern Ukraine, known as the Donbas region. This area had a large Russian-speaking population, and Russia claimed it was protecting ethnic Russians. The Minsk Accord, specifically Minsk II, is an agreement aimed at resolving the conflict in eastern Ukraine, particularly in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It was brokered in 2015 through diplomatic efforts involving Ukraine, Russia, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and representatives from the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. However, the Minsk Accord has faced significant challenges and has ultimately failed to bring an end to the fighting in eastern Ukraine. One of the major obstacles has been Russia's insistence that it is not a direct party to the conflict, and therefore not bound by the terms of the agreement. Fast forward to February 2022, and Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They aimed to topple the government of Vladimir Zelensky, who leaned toward the West. This invasion marked a turning point in European security and raised concerns about the potential use of nuclear weapons. The West's involvement in Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the Western world didn't sit idle. The response was united and resolute, showing a strong front against Russian aggression. But recent summits led by NATO, the G7, the EU, and the US paint a complex picture. While Western leaders express unity, the outcomes of these summits have left something to be desired. On the military front, Western nations provided substantial aid to Ukraine, but were cautious about direct engagement with Russian forces, opting for a strategy of not escalating the war further. The West's strategy included economic sanctions against Russia. These measures have had a significant impact, with some estimates suggesting a 10% to 15% decline in Russia's GDP. However, imposing an oil and gas embargo remains a challenge that hasn't been met. The impact of these measures extends to the West as well, and an energy crisis affecting consumers and companies. While this crisis will bring sacrifices, Western governments have been reluctant to fully explain its extent to the public, sending an implicit message of silence. Some argue that Putin has already lost due to the West's strong reaction, but the definition of victory or defeat in this conflict is not straightforward. Western restraint, while avoiding direct confrontation, can also be seen as a sign of weakness. Moreover, the world's perception of the conflict varies. Many emerging powers seem more resentful toward the West than disapproving of Russia's actions. This complicates efforts to isolate Russia. The Moscow-Beijing axis sees this conflict as an opportunity to challenge the Western-dominated world order. So, what's the way forward? The West's current strategy aims at a slow Russian non-victory, but it may be time to consider alternatives. This involves making tougher choices. The future for Russia appears increasingly challenging on multiple fronts. The consequences of its actions in Ukraine have had far-reaching effects, and these trends are likely to shape Russia's trajectory in the coming years. Let's examine potential outcomes, ranging from the most likely to the least likely. Internal coup. A theory gaining traction is the possibility of internal strife within the Kremlin leadership that leads to a political reshuffle. Leadership change has been a key element of Western strategies to end the war in Ukraine. Removing Putin, even in favor of a more radically nationalist leadership, could create opportunities for peace talks. The Kremlin elite's primary interest is preserving wealth and power, even if it means sacrificing Putin. This convergence of interests aligns with Western countries' desire for peace talks. The breakup of Russia. Picture a future where Russia's map is redrawn, its immense territory fragmented into smaller entities. Today, Russia's geopolitical landscape is composed of 89 federal entities, 6 of which lack international recognition. The breakup of Russia could create regional instability, especially in neighboring countries. The newly formed entities might face challenges in establishing political stability and economic viability, leading to potential conflicts and power struggles. The fragmentation could disrupt economic ties and trade routes, leading to economic challenges for both the newly formed entities and neighboring countries. The geopolitical dynamics in Eastern Europe and Asia would experience significant shifts. Neighboring countries and global powers would need to adapt to the new realities, potentially leading to realignments of alliances and trade partnerships. The European Union, EU, China and the United States could play pivotal roles in the aftermath. They might take over some territories to stabilize the region, potentially leading to the establishment of new states under international supervision. NATO gives up on Ukraine. Without NATO support, Ukraine's ability to defend its borders against Russian aggression could weaken. This might result in the gradual takeover of Ukrainian territories, causing a humanitarian crisis and reshaping regional boundaries. Ukrainians, who have looked to the West and NATO for support, might lose faith in these alliances. The abandonment could lead to a lasting disillusionment, impacting international relations and global cooperation efforts. Opposing nations, particularly Russia, could exploit NATO's withdrawal as evidence of the alliance's weakness. This could serve as potent propaganda, sowing doubt about NATO's effectiveness and unity both within member states and on the global stage. The loss of Ukrainian territory could heighten concerns among neighbouring countries, leading to increased military build-up and geopolitical tensions. This escalation could destabilize the entire region. Becoming the new Venezuela. One ominous possibility is that Russia could follow a path similar to that of Venezuela. Both Libya and Venezuela serve as stark examples of how civil unrest and political turmoil can devastate energy exports. Libya's oil production plummeted from 1.7 million barrels per day to a mere 365,000 in 2020, while Venezuela witnessed its production hit a multi-decade low. Russia's economy has already faced significant headwinds due to sanctions and international isolation. A protracted conflict and its aftermath could lead to further economic woes, including shrinking GDP, rising inflation, and unemployment. As international companies exit the Russian market, supply shortages become commonplace, affecting industries from aviation to technology. With a poorly diversified economy and sanctions stifling innovation and trade, Russia may find it challenging to rebound quickly. So, what happens to Russia now? The future for Russia appears increasingly challenging on multiple fronts. The consequences of its actions in Ukraine have had far-reaching effects, and these trends are likely to shape Russia's trajectory in the coming years. There's only one thing in geopolitics you can be sure of. Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma.